Welcome back to Weekend Breakfast with me, David Bull. The time, 8:21 on Saturday, April the 29th. Thank you very much indeed for your lovely comments this morning. Really appreciate them. Thank you very much indeed. Ash in Haywood in Manchester says civil service mandarins who undermine the government, in fact, are mutineering. They signed the Official Secrets Act. They took an oath to serve like forces personnel. They should be sacked, moved out or sent on gardening leave. Hi, David and Renee. I, for one, am not interested in the coronation, says Robin. I remember Queen Elizabeth's coronation. I was 5 at the time. We stood on the corner in the cold. She sped off. I hardly got a glance at all. I've no interest in King Charles and his green agenda. David says, Dave in Bristol, why do you keep calling it the Windsor Framework? It's the Windsor Frame Up. And John from Lincolnshire says, what the EU really misses is our money. Very well said indeed. Right, it's time for today's Head to Head. Head to Head. Well, joining us this morning, I'm delighted to say, Layla Softic, who's a public affairs analyst, also Patrick Timms, editor of Wolves of Westminster. A very good morning to the two of you. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Right, let's talk about the BBC. Look, I'm very passionate about the BBC. I worked there for a long time. Those Reithian principles, inform, educate and entertain. It's really important, I think, as part of sort of British life and backbone and infrastructure and all the rest of it. What do you make of what's going on? Richard Sharp essentially forced to resign. It's all, I think, pretty murky, actually. He was found to have broken the rules on public appointments by failing to declare this involvement in this £800,000 loan for Boris Johnson. Now, in his defence, he did actually mention it to Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary. He believes that that was enough. He then was appointed. What's going on? Is this deeply political?
I think it is deeply political. I think it's, you know, the BBC tends to have a leaning towards the left and then having...
Well, they would say they're impartial.
Yes, they would, of course.
And other people would say they lean to the right.
Yes.
Yes.
But I think having a right-wing chairman is not really what they were expecting. I think it's always very rare to find people in those positions who do tend to lean right, and there's a tirade against people like that because everyone needs to conform to this ideology of the left, and I think
so. You think he's gone because he leans to the right? I
think that there is an aspect of that because he's not the first person to be political as the chairman of the BBC.
But hang on a minute, just to be clear about this, remember, of course, it is a political appointment anyway. Also, the Labour government are very good at putting people in that they wanted, like Greg Dyke, for example. So that's nothing new. And actually, to be fair to Richard Sharp, he also negotiated the new BBC licence fee. So actually, I don't think he's done a bad job.
No, I think he's done a very good job at it. I think, it's a shame that Simon Case didn't feel the need to...
Well, he can't remember.
No, exactly. To take this further or to actually do anything about it. But I don't actually see anything wrong in introducing someone to someone and then that resulting in some kind of transaction.
Well,
that is how life works.
That's a really good point. Patrick, I mean, clearly what he did was exactly what Layla says. He introduced someone to someone. He took no personal... No, wait. So he took no personal gain.
My turn.
Yeah, he took no personal gain from that. I don't have a major problem with this. This is a political appointment. Is this a witch hunt?
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to find out. But what I would say is, just as you said that, I mean, the political and the elite class, they do this all the time, but then at the end, I mean, whose dad is a mechanic down the garage doesn't do that? Who doesn't put him in touch, his lad maybe, doesn't put him in touch with a job or a contact or that sort of thing? Actually, this kind of thing goes on all the time. At that level, perhaps it's just the equivalent.
Come on, Dr. Renee.
Yeah, of course it goes on all the time, but this isn't someone whose dad worked down the garage. This is the Prime Minister who makes the appointment, being introduced by the man who got the job to someone who could be very important.
So you're saying it did influence the decision?
Of course it did.
Well,
come on.
Of course we don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Right.
We don't know. But what I would say is, look, just as you've scuppered me, David, because I was going to mention Greg Dyke. In the sense
Gavin Davies,
because he was
another one.
He was a Labour donor. So these things are always political to an extent. Now, of course, Gary Lineker has come out, and I gather that's another thing for us to talk about, and said it should not be political, not now, not ever. I mean, what do we think about that?
Well, you answer the question. So you're right. Gary Lineker, who I think should keep quiet, he's paid £1.4 million.
Yes.
He is not meant to comment politically, but he said it shouldn't be a political appointment. Now, also, let's be very clear here, because it's the BBC Charter, it's enshrined in law, so therefore, whether he likes it or not, it is a political appointment. So should Gary Lineker butt out?
Well, I think he should butt out, because I would be saying to him, maybe people in his position, I mean, I respect him very much actually as a footballer, his former career, but maybe not now, not ever should actually apply to people like him being paid 1.4 million, as you say. And also, it's important for us to bear in mind that the BBC is the state broadcaster. The state is inextricably connected with the governance and therefore the politics of the country. So how can such an appointment not really be political? How can that happen?
OK, you would expect me to lean towards exactly what you're saying, especially as I lean to the right in my views. But on this occasion, I think, from the very beginning, he had to go. I'm amazed that it took this long.
So what's really interesting about this, and I wonder if you would agree, Layla, but I think had Simon Case backed him up, he'd still be in position.
I agree completely. I think it is a question of the government not wanting to dig in. Rishi Sunak does not want anything to do with this. He wants to be clear of Boris Johnson's messes, and so he's, staying very much away from it publicly, but I think behind the scenes he's kind of said, absolutely not, you've had nothing to do with this, don't say anything, we just need to get this cleared up.
So you make a really important point. Rishi Sunak's incredibly good at disappearing.
Yeah. Very good at it. He's a professional at it. That's why he is seen as such a sleek individual. I mean, remember during COVID when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he did all these sleek ad campaigns. He was presented in this certain way, and everyone's like, "Wow, Dishy Rishi, this is the man to beat, really." And he is very good at presenting himself in a particular way, and he wants to be seen in that way. And if he's not, he will find some kind of back scene.
So he appears when he wants to.
Yeah,
basically.
absolutely.
I mean, so there's another story actually linked into this, and Simon McCoy, who I think is a very good news presenter actually, he's come out this morning and he said the corporation is failing the licence fee payers over a lack of British accents. Now, this isn't quite what you think when you first read it. So what they've done basically is they've stuck the BBC's international channel, basically they merged BBC News and BBC World to save money.
Yeah.
So these are two completely different organisations broadcasting to two completely different audiences around the world. So you've got BBC World, which is outward looking and is a world service essentially, and then you've got BBC News, which is essentially looking domestically. If you watch the BBC's news output, which I was absolutely transfixed with for years and years and years, it's unwatchable because I don't really want to be told what's going on in Singapore.
Okay, so may I?
Yes. So the question I have for you is, what is going on at the BBC?
Well, I mean, I think for one thing what's going on is, are we being told what to care about again? Because that would be very BBC. In my experience. On the other hand, though, we have, I mean, what actually is a British accent these days, and why is that something
I think what he meant by that was about to focus on things that actually affect Britain. So the cost of living.
An accent to the content rather than the
I think he means exactly that. I think it was a bad choice.
Very much. But in that case, is it not more a case that this is actually more of a protest against what we know about the initiatives that there have been to maybe cut the BBC licence fee or to cut it out entirely? So what you do is the local councils do this as well all the time. You merge two services together, and then when people complain about it, you say, it's budget cuts. It's budget cuts.
What I actually think it does, David, is I think it shows us that the BBC think now that people are not getting their news in the main from TV. I think they think that their audience is now digital and getting it from there. I think that's what it tells us.
So it's really interesting, actually. And so, for example, here at TalkTV Towers, we're moving very much all into television, which is the right way for us to go. The BBC very much seems to be going the other way. And I saw recently Nicky Campbell's popped up on BBC News, and he's actually broadcasting from a radio studio, which is a very regressive thing to do, particularly when you have a ring-fenced income paid by the taxpayer, where actually you have to pay for it.
Well, maybe what it means is people want their news in a different way. They want it presented in a way that the BBC aren't doing.
I think they're just very... To be a little bit ironic, I think they're very conservative in the way they want to present their news. They have this old-fashioned, structured way of looking at how news should be broadcast.
Traditional.
And traditional. That's the word. And they're going to do it that way. And
But isn't this about priorities? Because what they're essentially saying, I feel, is that is no longer a political priority. BBC Three suddenly is a political priority, which is to get a youthful audience, which they won't do, because we know that young people don't watch television or linear television in the same way. So the question, I suppose, is what does it mean for the future of the BBC? All of this stuff. Richard Sharp, the fact is you've got the merger of these two news channels coming together. Does the BBC survive all this?
I think it does, because it's so beloved by the British public.
Is it?
And I think so. I think there is and also you have to look at the fact that internationally it's seen as a standard for modern journalism. It is, the BBC. Its international coverage is incredible, and it's a very highly respected institution that
People
I do
are very
think
used to it.
Yeah, I think it's going to survive because of that, but I do think it's going to need wholesale reform to sort of change the way it looks at change the way it looks at presenting media and approaching broadcasting, and that might be in finding a new chairman who is ready to take on those roles and say, this is what needs to change, this is the way forward, and putting something.
Would you mind if I added to that just briefly? That I think that's absolutely right to say what she said, because what I'd add to it is that this is what happens when people are very used to something. This is what institutions are. This is what establishments are.
But tides do turn.
They do, but not very often.
So
but in a multimedia landscape, things are changing dramatically.
I know, but then do you not think that perhaps, in fact, in a landscape where there is a lot of change, some people, actually quite a lot of people, are going to hold on to what they remember and what they know? There's going to be quite a
Will the
demographic
BBC
of that.
survive?
Will it survive? Yes. Will it be called the BBC in 20 years? I don't know. Will it be doing the same thing in 20 years? I don't know. But the thing I always like to say to people like this sort of thing, will the BBC survive? Well, I mean, BBC News is one thing, but, I mean, I'm just going to be a massive, nerd here. Doctor Who.
I understand that.
That's BBC.
I understand that.
The BBC does a lot more than just talk about news.
We need to move on to another topic, but also
Sure.
I think it's worth considering the commercial implications of Doctor Who, for example, which actually brings in huge amounts of revenue via its commercial arm and so on. So, anyway, let's talk about train strikes now. I talked about this yesterday. We've now got a new train strike announced for the day of the Eurovision Song Contest final. I called that repellent yesterday. That's on May the 13th. Also, then we've got these new strikes by ASLEF. This is then going to take out some more of the Eurovision, so the semi-finals, but also the FA Cup final, also the derby. I mean, really, what your view on these striking train workers? I mean, they're not badly paid.
No, they're not badly paid for what they do at all. The pay offer that was given to them was completely fair, considering the majority of people who work in the private sector don't have the luxury of striking. I mean, I wish I did, but that is not something that you can go up to your boss and say, I want more money. They'll say, great, good for you. Yeah, you can leave or you can stay. And so I think it is an incredibly privileged position to be in, to say, no, this extra money that you've offered me, I'm not going to take it. I'm just going to keep being disruptive. And I'm going to be disruptive to other people's places of work. I mean, the Eurovision is going to be an international beacon for the UK. It's meant to put us on a global stage and say...
And indeed Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly. And it's meant to say, this is the special relationship that the UK has with Ukraine. This is all the work that we've done to support them financially, militarily, and culturally as well through the Eurovision. And so to take that away and to minimise it and to bring the attention, it's very childish to say, but look at me, I'm still striking, I'm still upset about it. You can't have your nice things.
I'm going to take away from you the things that you enjoy.
Exactly. It's opportunity that's taken away from people. It's going to be bad for business, for local business owners in Liverpool who, they're going to make money off of the tourists that are there. And then if tourists are stuck, if their, transport's a mess, it's just going to reflect really poorly on the UK for not being able to organise these things.
Push people onto coaches, which is what's happening anyway.
Yeah.
People are travelling by coach now, not train. And that's
so Patrick, just in terms of that, has the public now grown very weary of the train strikes?
I mean, I think the answer to that is yes, they have in some ways, and no, they haven't in others because they've now got used to them. But
is that René's point then? Actually, what they're going to do is actually decimate their own industry.
Well, yes, but I mean, do they care about that? Becomes the other point.
Well, they will when they don't have a job.
What I would say is actually, I'll draw this back to the education stuff, if you don't mind, just briefly. So Jeff Barton of the ASCL, the General Secretary, now he was saying, look, if we're the ones now fighting for your children's opportunities, I read this in the Telegraph, and if we're not doing it, then quite frankly, who is?
Right.
And so that's what he says. And you think, so what they're doing is they're justifying to themselves the ability to do this because, it's become what they consider a moral debate, but they are actually ultimately judge, jury and executioner of that debate.
They don't think they're doing it for moral reasons.
I think they do.
No, I don't think they do.
I don't, and I'm beginning to wonder. Well, the RMT also, remember, Mick Lynch, this is about actually, that's his job, isn't it?
Yeah.
To cause maximum disruption the entire time. That's his job, though, right?
Yeah.
Well, you remember who it used to be?
Which?
Bob Crow.
Yeah, well, indeed, of course, and his job was to cause maximum disruption. Exactly
It's
right.
how they make money off of it, and so they're making themselves.
Well, actually, that leads really nicely into another story this morning. 4 major teaching unions have announced an unprecedented attempt to stage a joint walkout. This will see almost every school in England close, and this means they've rejected 4.5% pay offer from the government. This is all the unions, NAHT, ASCL, NAS, UWT and NEU, all coming together, essentially. Now, what that would mean... This is massive impact. All state schools, sixth form colleges, even some independent schools would be under threat as a result of these plans. It would affect 300 to 400, nearly 500,000 teachers. Is that acceptable?
No, it's completely unacceptable. Look, I have more sympathy than most for teachers. My mum is a teacher. I understand the difficult job that it is. I know how much work goes into it, and I don't think that they're paid enough. Absolutely, I think teachers should be paid more. They are educating our
Should you take it
future.
out on the kids?
No, you should never take it out on the children.
Right, yeah, go on.
A point that's never raised is that teachers have the best pension around. They get something like 24% contribution from us, the taxpayer.
Yeah.
So, you know, I feel really strongly about teachers and our kids. Our kids have been destroyed in COVID when teachers used them as pawns to get masks in because they felt there was a political point to keep teachers out. When we actually kept our kids out of school more than any other country bar Italy. We really did. So I feel really strongly about this. Our kids need education now. They don't need this.
Absolutely. And when you look at how the UK is falling behind other countries in the Western Hemisphere, it's quite shocking to think that we're falling behind everyone, and we're not going to have a generation of people who are going to be able to compete in the labour market. And what's that going to do for Britain in the future? It's just going to be detrimental to us in the long run.
I think you're absolutely right. Can I just put a question to everybody? Do you think they're making a sport of it now, the unions?
Yes.
Yes.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained. You know, so, oh, look, they've got away with that pay rise. Let's see what we can get away with.
Well, you bring up a very important point, and that's the question I've been asking everyone this morning, which is actually, isn't this something much bigger politically? This is actually about bringing down the government.
I mean, yes, and from various intelligence work that we do at Wolves, I am aware that, yes, they are.
What have you found?
Not live on air.
No, okay.
Let's just say that...
Give us an inkling.
That what I can say is that all of the actual impetus behind this kind of stuff is definitely political, and is being coordinated by the kinds of political movements who were of the Corbynista era. Of course, now the Corbynista era is officially over, but the same people are doing the same things at the same time. Now, for example, if you go back to 2020, the summer, so this is where we didn't have vaccines, and the schools were trying to close.
They were.
And there was some intel that we passed on that essentially enabled the government to have some inkling of what the legal arguments from the unions were going to be, and consequently the schools stayed largely open. So this is the sort of thing that you have to be very careful about talking about live on air. But the reality is, you know, yes, it is generally political in nature, this sort of thing. You must never let these people tell you it's about the issue they happen to be bleating about at the time. It's always about something bigger than that.
And so the real sadness, and I watched young people who are, you know, I don't know, 13, 14 or whatever, and basically they have almost been brainwashed into saying it's okay for my education to suffer because the teachers need more money. So they're being played.
They're being played, and then in COVID, of course, what we told them was that school wasn't actually that important. You know, we've told you all your life you have to go to school every day, don't you dare truant, it's really important. And then COVID came along, and what we said to them was, oh, well, you know what, it's actually not that important, you can stay at home.
It's really shocking, and I think it's something that's carried on. I mean, you see this at university level as well, where
and the workplace.
Where students they're on the picket lines with professors. And I think to myself, well, actually, you're paying over £9,000 every single year for this education that you're not receiving. I mean, I know for myself, when I was in all of my years of university, actually, there were students that I would have maybe 2 lectures a semester, and that was it, because everything else was closed because of strike. And they thought, oh no, but this is fine. I'm getting, it's my education. I'm supporting the teachers, but you're not getting an education.
No, and you're the consumer at the end of the day,
exactly.
because it's transactional now.
It's not seen as a business model, which it is fundamentally. Universities are businesses, and they should run like businesses, but they're not. And schools, unfortunately, are the place in which all these ideas are harbored, and they're taught to children. They're brain fed these kind of, you have to believe that strikes are great, net zero, climate change,
that's
like
a really
all these
good word,
things.
brain fed. I love that. That brain fed, not brainwashed, brain fed. I love that.
Can I just ask you very quickly then, because that moves us on to a very quick story about being brain fed. They have now developed a grouper Phillip. This is a fish, okay, which actually isn't a fish at all. It's been grown from cells in a lab and then 3D printed into a fish shape. This has been done by a company, Stakeholder Foods, in Singapore's Umami Meats. So apparently this is incredible what they did. So basically they take the stem cells from a fish, they multiply them in vats containing nutrients, and when they then reach a certain number, they then differentiate anyway into muscle and fat cells, and then basically they put them into a printer, print a piece of fish including all the ridges on it. Is that the future?
I hope not. That sounds absolutely horrific.
Stops overfishing?
It does, but there's nothing appealing about nutrient soup in my food. It's never been something that I have aspired to consume.
I don't buy farmed fish because it doesn't taste nice, and actually it isn't that good for you because they live in hideous conditions.
Yep.
So this to me...
Like battery chickens.
Like battery chickens. This, to me, is revolting.
And I would agree with that. So I did a documentary when I was doing another show where I went to salmon farms and had a look at what was going on. But just in terms of this, they actually say that this is better because, of course, because they're engineering this, there's nothing wrong with it. I.e., there's no pollutants. There's not. Yes, they would say that. So for you, would you eat printed fish?
Well, can I just ask you the questions that I asked myself when I read this story?
Yes.
Okay. 1, will it destroy the fishing industry?
Yes, that's the idea.
2, what about underfishing? We talk a lot about overfishing.
Yes.
What about underfishing?
It's a valid
and it's
yes,
a biodiversity
that's a very valid
thing.
point.
Okay. Is anyone actually thinking about this, or is this just scientists getting carried away? Which they should do, and why shouldn't they? But will we all become pseudo-pescatarians?
Well, that's what some lobbies want us to do, isn't it? And the thing is, what they're then doing is, and going back to your farm salmon, it's actually, the reason it's orange is because they give it orange food colouring, and it's not actually pink, which is what salmon should be.
And if you buy wild salmon, which I do,
pink.
it's pink. It's completely, and the texture is
because they eat
also,
shellfish, that's why it's pink.
But the texture is also completely different.
Can I just ask my last question?
Yes.
I asked myself, how much does it cost per head?
Oh, very good
Because they don't
question.
say that in the
They don't say that
in the story. I read this in the story. They don't say
It's
that.
science.
There are big companies feeding these scientists with the money to do this research, rubbing their hands together in glee, thinking about the money they will make from this.
And
fish.
how do you make a gourmet 3D printed fish fillet?
Yes,
Is there
exactly.
is there a sauce?
Well, I'll have to ask some chefs. Thank you very much to both of you for coming in. That's Layla Softic, who's a public affairs analyst, also Patrick Timms, editor of Wolves of Westminster, and that was today's Head to Head. Head to Head. Culinary delight of printed fish. I can't wait. I absolutely can't wait. Right, time for a break. After the break, we'll take your calls, your thoughts, and your messages. This is TalkTV.